So I welcome you once again to the 2025 Franciscan Zoom lecture series hosted by the Franciscan School of Theology. My name is Sister Juliette Mousseau, RSCJ, and I serve at FST as the Vice President for Academic Affairs. Our presenter tonight is Brother Johannes Freyer. He was born in Germany and entered the Franciscan Order after training as a bank clerk. After his philosophical and theological studies, he earned a doctorate in spirituality and a post-doctorate in theological anthropology and the history of theology. He was active in education and taught for 22 years at the Pontifical University Antonianum in Rome, of which he was president, which is called Rettore Magnificus, for 2 sessions. In the last 2 years, he was also Theological Adviser of the aid agency Franziskaner-Helfen, which is seated in Bonn, Germany. Since 2012, he's been teaching with us here at the Franciscan School of Theology as a visiting professor more or less every spring semester, and we're always delighted to have him with us. And so I welcome Brother Johannes, who will be talking about the Franciscan intellectual tradition, a tradition turned upside down. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to everybody. Habemus Papam. With his first words, Pope Leo wished to the whole world peace, the peace of the risen Christ, a peace without weapons, a peace based on dialogue and mercy. The new Pope invites us to be a united missionary church, open to everybody, particularly close to those who suffer. Recalling Pope Francis, Pope Leo invites us to be a synodal church, rooted in the love of God. Inspired by Francis of Assisi, we want to look for and to find this loving God where Francis found him, upside down, and to discover how the Franciscan intellectual tradition became a tradition turned upside down. Saint Francis Turned Upside Down is the title of a stage play by the Italian founder of the narrative theatre, Marco Bagliani. The play remembers the life of Saint Francis and shows up the essential of the Franciscan spirituality. Based on biographical texts, the play presents that Francis wasn't yet a common follower of the gospel as many other contemporary. Following a dream, a utopia which seems impractical and impossible to most, he turned his life and his world upside down. Powered by the gospel, he started to see the reality from a different point of view in a perspective where the world is inverted, turned upside down. Looking to his world, not anymore from up above, but from down below, his perspectives, his dispositions, and his feelings changed. Upside down, he followed the footsteps of Jesus Christ in poverty, humility, and with simplicity. The fact that his life was turned upside down was the consequence of an existential experience. Looking to his biography, Francis dreamed to look to his world from up above, to see the world from the top of his hometown. His dream was to become a knight, to belong to the upper class, but the reality of life does not always follow dreams. Awakened from his nightly daydreams, he had to learn the painful lesson that he could not find his place at the top. It was only one encounter, unpleasant and bitter at first, that showed him the way which literally led downwards, to where the despised and outcasts of society, the lower classes, lived. Francis himself tells us in his testament, "The Lord gave to me, Brother Francis, thus to begin to do penance. For when I was in sin, it seemed to me very bitter to sleep lepers. And the Lord himself led me amongst them, and I showed mercy to them. And when I left them, that which had seemed to me bitter was changed for me into sweetness of body and soul. And afterwards I remained a little, and I left the world. And the Lord gave me so much faith in churches that I would simply pray and say thus: we adore you, Lord Jesus Christ, here and in all your churches which are in the whole world. And we bless you, because by the Holy Cross you have redeemed the world. In his encounter, Francis experienced the change of his perspective, and still more, he experienced the change of his emotions. He could no longer look down on the lepers, the poor people from above. What's more, he could no longer share the lifestyle of those who were partly responsible for the poverty and exclusion of the weak. He left this world, which was responsible for exclusion, to share the life of those at the bottom. He became their friend. In the context of human competence, the ability to change perspectives is understood to mean the ability to adopt other views in addition to my own. As a first step, it is helpful to become aware of one's own socialization within a specific cultural situation. In the case of Francis, he became aware of the social and religious situation of his hometown Assisi, which led to the exclusion and contempt of the weak and drove them into poverty. Building on this insight, a change of perspective aims to be able to put oneself in the shoes of the strangers, and particularly the despised. Ideally, a cautious change of perspectives prevents misunderstandings, reservations, fears, and contributes to conflict resolution. Francis was able to become a friend of those who must live upside down, and he started to look to the reality from upside down. Those who cautiously experience the encounter with what is rejected because of its otherness are capable of changing not only their perspective, but also their attitude towards life. By changing in the encounter my point of view, I recognize that the world looks different from other perspectives. This experience is also the basis of my social competence to change my position and perhaps to change also my place in this world, as Francis has done. The realization in the change of perspective brings liberation from the increasing limitation and distortion of perception, the narrowing of vision, the inner impoverishment of the proper lifestyle. And it brings a kind of wisdom, the wisdom of knowing and overcoming the border which separates and the walls which excludes. From now on, you can look for completely new ways. Francis discovered the footsteps of Jesus Christ, the gospel, to follow. This kind of experience is not purely cognitive. It's not purely rational. Francis tells us, what had seemed bitter to me was turned into sweetness of soul and body. The experience of the encounter, which changes the life parameters, is also characterized by emotional aspects and corresponds to a process of formation and education. It corresponds to an operation of learning to be able to integrate different perspectives into their own thinking, feeling, and acting. To learn the ability to empathize in the context of social interaction. Empathy does not focus on thinking, but on feeling. There is experienced an emotional resonance of the situation of the other person. Empathy compromises at least cognitive, emotional, motivational, and intentional components. In the case of Francis, he learned to act with mercy. The ability to empathize is particularly significant for a religious learning process in two ways. On the one hand, it can motivate a change of perspective and ideally pro-social behavior. It ranges from an initial emotional sympathy to the ability to understand the emergency situation not only of individuals, but also of social groups, for example, migrants, the poor, the political oppressed. On the other hand, it illuminates more concretely the significance of the religious message, and it helps to interpret the experience of emotional and cognitive change in the light of the spiritual message. Francis not only reacted on a humanistic, social level, he found strength in his faith, guided by God and redeemed by Jesus Christ. He experienced not only a shift of his mind, turning upside down, he became able to see new things which cannot be seen from above. The lepers, the beggars, the poor, the sinners, the losers, those who are struggling in the world and also in the church. And there, upside down, Francis discovered our Lord Jesus Christ. What a wonder, what a surprise. God himself turned upside down. The Most High shows up in his Son down below. O wonderful loftiness and stupendous dignity, O sublime humility, O humble sublimity. God turned upside down in his Son's self-emptying. This turning upside down characterizes Francis' utopia, his ideal place. And afterwards, I delayed a little and left the world. Upside down, he interpreted the gospel and followed the footsteps of Jesus Christ in poverty, humility, and with simplicity. This simplicity as acting from down below and not anymore from up above became the distinctive identity of the Franciscan way of life. The Most High revealed to me that I should live according to the pattern of the Holy Gospel, and I had this written down simply, and we may say from down below. And the Lord Pope confirmed it to me. And for those who came to receive life, gave whatever they had to the poor, and were content with one tunic, patched inside and out with a cord and short treasures. We desired nothing more. The holy poor simplicity, to be turned upside down, confounds all the wisdom of this world, in which humans act mostly from above. From down below, simplicity helps to discover the true queen wisdom, the spiritual wisdom in our Lord Jesus Christ, who laid down his life for his sheep. Up above, inside of the city walls, the defining characteristics of Francis' life were squandering his father's money, dreaming of a career as a knight, fighting on the front lines in the city wars, and feasting with his friends from his youth. Now, down below, under the day laborers and outcast, in the great outdoors, he discovers different values for his future life, poverty and simplicity, as a basic requirement to proclaim the gospel, whether convenient or inconvenient, brotherhood and sisterhood with all creatures, mercy and the willingness to forgive as a change leading to peace, Being a homeless itinerant, pilgrim, and stranger in this world, he experiences God's generosity in everything. This change of the outer and inner standpoint of Francis and his brotherhood soon became in touch with the intellectual world of the new universities of Paris, Oxford, and Bologna. By a dynamic reciprocation between the Franciscan form of life, the orthodox patristic tradition, and the newest scholastic methodologies, a new philosophical and theological approach, a new paradigm was initiated based on the change of perspective and language. A distinct set of concepts and thought patterns rooted down below. Theories, research methods, postulates, and standards have been turned upside down. At the center of this vision, the Franciscans recognized God, the highest good, in his self-diffusive love. God's creative word, which in his incarnation has taken our flesh in the real sense of the word and sanctified our bodies, our world, our history, and the whole creation. To think and to experience God not anymore out of the world, but inside of the reality, as cruel, as dark, as sinful it is. To think God, yet not only from above, but from inside down, transformed the human ideas and images, bringing forth different behavior and its moral implications based on humility and mercy as a distinct form of justice. As a beatitude perfecting the gift of counsel, characterizing prudence, giving orientation to justice, the virtue which regulates all our morality. Let us recognize some of the propositions underlying the Franciscan conceptions, which are rooted in the existential and spiritual experience of Francis himself. Looking to his world with humility from down and not anymore from above, Francis was able to recognize that the other human being is not my concurrent or my enemy, but my brother and my sister. Also the stranger, the poor, and the outcast is welcomed in this brotherhood and sisterhood. Still more, Francis was able to extend his fraternity to a universal vision. All creatures are brothers and sisters, created by the goodness of the same God. Rooted in Francis' practical exercise of brotherhood and sisterhood was the participation of the Franciscan scholars in the philosophical, theological development of the concept of the dignity of all human beings, which led to our human rights. Our human rights, a consequence of the brother and sisterhood brought into the world by Francis. Even more, a dignity was attributed to every single creature. The fraternity that Francis sees between us and all other creatures on account of the common nature of their createdness was leading not only to promote the worth of every human being, but lead also to an ethical recognition of the dignity of all creatures. Living beings share a common origin and ancestry in the evolution of life on earth. The sense of fraternity with creatures has a real foundation in our knowledge of biology. Our fraternity with them lets us recognize their inherent worth, their needs, and their abilities. In fraternity, we understand the demand to respect them. Francis' own relationship with Lady Poverty leads also to new concepts. Interpreting poverty, Bonaventure, in his Apologia Pauperum, makes a distinction between dominion and use. We human beings don't have the dominion on the natural resources of the creation. We have the privilege to use what we need to sustain a dignified life. Based on this ethical concept was developed the vision of the usus pauper, the poor or restricted use, as a new way of life in a new social and economic environment. It requires a specific behavior as the beginning of a spiritual quest. What do I really need to live and to perform my task? It was Peter John Olivi, a disciple of Bonaventure, who worked out the perspective of an alternative economy of the fruitful sustainability, which promotes the efficiency of services in favor of the public welfare instead of the exploitation of natural resources and the accumulation of hoarded wealth in the hands of only a few rich people. Linked to Francis' lifestyle of poverty was his conduct, defined by simplicity. This simplicity became a characteristic of the friars' lifestyle, of the architecture of their convents and churches. It is not surprising that an ongoing atmosphere of simplicity forms also the ideas and ways of thinking of the intellectual scholars. For example, William of Ockham, and his famous concept of simplicity, known as Ockham's razor, a scientific principle which gives precedence to simplicity. Of two competing theories, the simpler explanation of an entity is to be preferred. The principle is also expressed as entities are not to be multiplied beyond necessity. The principle of simplicity, the razor, can be applied in many fields of science and logic and is recognized up to our days. Commonly, all scholastic research and investigation was based on the human gifts of the intellect as instrument of cognition. Following also this academic approach, the Franciscan schools, more than all the other schools, never neglected the senses, the wits, as instruments of affection and intuition. The Franciscan scholastics tried to present a holistic vision of humans, the intellect as instrument of the more scientific and empiric studies to know what something is, the senses as instruments of the intuition collaborate to consider the spiritual insight into the meaning of something. True knowledge then may be achieved by the interplay of rationality and affective love. Unilateral recognition by poor intellectualism leads to functionalism, to utilitarianism, to exploit our world, and to drive conquest. Unilateral identification by affection will lead to subjective, arbitrary, and affective spiritual fancy. Leavened by love, as patient affection knowledge, on the other hand, will be conjunct with realistic reverence, incarnated care, and responsible generosity. Whereas rational consideration with its academic, analytic approach alone will observe more from above, promote speculative thinking, and lead to domination of the world. On the other hand, the interplay with impatient, intuitive, and symbolic appreciation will promote the practical ministry of service, aid, and mercy, while intellectual speculation will promote the necessary knowledge of a subject and a scientific expertise to control and handle our world. The interplay with impatient search of goodness, beauty, and happiness will find the truth of wisdom and respect our environment. What the Franciscan intellectual tradition learned and teaches is that power of intellect, philosophic theological speculation, academics and science alone by itself creates a heartless functional world in which the strongest survives and the canny is the king. And on the other side, an unbalanced, emotional, subjective, improvisational or spiritualistic lifestyle creates an impulsive world in which the faith is expressed in quasi-magic devotions. History teaches us that both directions have a tendency towards religious fundamentalism, which looks from above down, to whom is not willed or by his conditions of life not able to share the same convictions. The Franciscans have been mostly aware of these negative tendencies. In the true spirit of what is Catholic, universal, open-minded faith, rich in plurality and united in the communion of proper diversity, an image of the Holy Trinity, they identified God's creative, overflowing love in the primacy of his passionate Son, Jesus Christ, fullness of wisdom, and true human, the ecce homo on the cross. On the cross shows upside down in his Son, Jesus Christ. The cross, the low point of human existence, is identified as the highest expression of God's love towards his creatures. That's the paradox of our Christian faith. A love which appears from down. On the cross, as deepest expression of the incarnated devotion of God towards the lost humanity, the Franciscan tradition recognizes the center of gravity, the epicenter of a new life. It's from inside down where the human beings and the world are recreated and redeemed. This love, which is not only incarnated in the reality of our world, but which has chosen the last place under us, is the cause of a new philosophical, theological, and spiritual pattern. It's not simply to think up from the grassroots. It's a change of life parameters. To design the whole vision from upside down, the place where we can find God. It's a contrastive way to see ourselves, to see our world, and to see our God. To look from upside down had in the Franciscan tradition and will profound consequences have in our lives. not only in our religious and spiritual beliefs. Seeing the world from below also has social and political consequences. The life of Francis, the Franciscan tradition, and above all our encounter with the rejected, the unwanted, the suffering, the hungry, and the abused nature challenge our point of view and can provoke us to leave our world above in order to discover, like Francis, Jesus Christ below. In such a way, the Franciscan tradition teaches us that love from below can change and redeem our world. The encounter with the poor, those who suffer and live with fear, is not one activity among others, but is the foundational experience of one's conversion. The theological locus where Christ himself is revealed. The poor person is a sign, almost a kind of a sacrament of God's presence, teached us Pope Francis. And the encounter with them is capable of transforming the bitterness of existence into sweetness of soul and body, as Francis of Assisi experienced. This attention to the poor opens up new paths to our very understanding of faith. The poor, living upside down, thus became not only recipients of our charity, but our spiritual teachers who evangelize us. The poor save us because they tear us away from self-centeredness, from the illusion of self-sufficiency, from the idolatry of wealth, and bring us back to the essentials of the gospel, to discover and to stay together with God's love. And the echo of this we could hear today also in the first words of the new Pope Leo, who offers us peace, a peace given by the risen Christ, a peace which unifies the world in the love of God, a peace which don't need any more weapons, a peace where is a place for the hungry, the poor, the outcasted, those who we do fear in our reality. The peace who unites us in the plurality of diversity in the communion of our church. The peace which will bring us redemption and salvation, acting in mercy as a distinct way of justice. The mercy we will find in Jesus Christ. We will find in God's superfluous love, which is recognized on the cross. So with these words, the new Pope, invites us to go on the way Pope Francis started with the synodal process in our church. So the synodal process, in a certain way, is to look to our church, to our parishes, to our dioceses, not anymore from above, but to look also inside of our parishes, our communities, our families, our dioceses, inside of the church from down, where we can find the true wisdom, Jesus Christ.